That's Brad and I'm Phil.
Whoa. Hang on. This is my part. This is my part. I'm Mat Armstrong and this is my paddock.
And so far in the paddock build, we've got our roof on, we've got our EPDM laid out, and we also got our flow screed down.
And now that that's completed, we're going to be fitting the doors, installing the cladding, and completely finishing the roof.
First job we got to do is get some batons installed onto our wall, ready to take our cladding. When it comes to our batons, we basically take an average measurement and then cut all of our batons down to the same size. And then we can start installing them with some 63mm ring shank nails in our D-Walk nail gun. So we're only actually installing batons around the 2 door openings and the window, because this is going to give us the layout of our sill and doors when we come to install them next. So we install these on the studs behind using our nail gun, making sure there's no gaps more than 400mm, and making sure we cover across any openings, including the bottom of the window. Next job is to install some fly mesh, so that's basically this stuff here, and I'm not doing it, DB is, so this is Dan, this is our good friend, and he's basically come here to help us install the window and the doors, but we've roped him into doing something else like we normally do.
As always.
As always. It wouldn't be the Home Improvements channel without us getting somebody else to do all the work for us. So Dan got on with installing the few pieces of batten that we had missed before putting in that fly mesh. So this stuff comes in a roll, you roll it out, cut it to size, and then you just pin it to the bottom of your first lot of battens. And what this does is creates a barrier to stop any creatures getting in behind your cladding and creating any sort of nests, because nobody wants that behind your walls. That is all the battening we're going to be doing for the time being. Now we can start installing our window.
Our first job is to make sure that the base is completely level.
With our best Houdini impression out the way, we get on with checking our base. So the way we do that is to set up a laser level and then a measuring tape to measure the difference. We had a 1mm difference, and trust me, on a timber build, that is pretty good. So we put a 1mm packer where it was slightly low, and then moved on to sticking the end trims on our sills. So this is an aluminium window from Aluminium Trade Windows, so big shout out to those guys. Remember, link is in the description for all of the stuff we use. With that all glued up, we can get that sill stuck into some CT1 silicone, and we also added a little counter batten under that sill to prevent it falling while we install the rest of the window. So we pack the sides to make sure it's completely centre of our opening, and also that it's completely parallel on the front of the building. One last check and we can get on with getting the window in. Breaking news! The weather has changed again and it's slightly raining, but we love it! So we're just gonna carry on! With the monsoon gone, we got on with siliconing the back edge of our sill before lifting in the rest of that window frame. So Dan lifted it into position before making the strangest face ever. I can only assume he trapped his fingers. Once he had got over the pain of that, we start to pack in the sides of that frame, making sure that it's still central of our opening. What's that, Dan?
Huh?
Spot on. As you can see, Dan was super impressed with my input there, and then he carried on fixing that framing. So we screw through the thermal break that is on aluminium windows with some timber fixings. First frame is in, so that window's in. We're not actually going to install the glass yet because it's going to be easier to do all of the glass at once. So we're going to get on with getting the rest of our frames, which is our 2 bifolds, installed. Just like our window, we always start with the sill, making sure it is completely level before sticking it down and bringing over our frame. Brad did the normal trick of pretending to help, and we all know he wasn't going to actually help. So me and Dan did all the work like usual, and we brought over the pre-assembled frame. So this is a 3-panel bifold, and we lift it into position onto that sill, remembering to silicone the back edge like we did in the window. Once it's in, we can slide it back and get it parallel with the front of the building before opening one of the openers so that we can get to where we're going to be putting our fixings, because obviously you can't put fixings in with the door closed. So I hold that all in position to make sure it doesn't fall out while Dan marks out for the fixings. So we measure up 100mm off each corner and put a fixing, and then we also split the difference and put a further 3 fixings in, but none of these are tight, they're all loose, just to hold the frame and stop it from falling. Once that's done, we set up our laser level so we can make sure our jambs are completely straight and plump.
As Phil just said, so basically we're using the laser to make sure we get our jambs absolutely bang on. So what I like to do, if you want to come and have a look, I use a white packer just because we can see it a bit easier. So we run it down the side of our subframe, just making sure that the jam is absolutely perfect. Right, with all that set up, now what I'm going to do is get all my packers in position and get this fixed up.
So when it comes to your packers, what we do, we want it super tight, and then we put it just above or just below your fixings. So we don't like to screw through the packers because sometimes it can split them. So using those wood screws, we tighten up through that thermal break, nice and tight, and then double check with a level to make sure we haven't pulled it out of plumb. So we've got 3 in the centre and then 2 on those top corners. And as you can see, we like to start on the hinge side and then go over to the latch side after. Here Dan's just demonstrating what can happen if you just go tightening everything up. There'll be flex and it won't be straight. So there's a bit of a big gap at the top here. The reason is I like to leave 20mm rather than 10, because if that base plate is out, you need the space to be able to get everything plumb and square.
A great success.
Well, Dan was pleased with himself. So with all the fixings in and everything plumb and square, we fill the space around that door with some expanding foam before moving on to our second set of bifolds. And these bifolds have been designed to open up away from that corner so that you get the amazing view that you can see from inside, unobscured.
So that is the frames complete. I just want to do a massive shout out to Aluminium Trade Windows for supplying these in this video. Link is in the description below. Let's get these doors glazed.
So when it comes to the window, all we need to do is pack the 4 corners equally to hold the pane central of our opening. So this is a fixed pane, so we don't need to worry about toe and heel. And don't worry, I'll explain that a little bit more when we move on to the doors. So with the corners packed, we can slide our pane of glass in, remembering that these panels of glass have an outside and an inside. So with the glass in, we can fit our aluminium beads, starting with the top and bottom and then getting in our 2 sides. We then use some packers to hold our beads temporarily into position before moving on to installing our rubber gaskets. So these gaskets are super tight and you will need some lubrication to get them in. And just remember, you should always overcut that rubber gasket because they will shrink back. So we handed this job off to Dan because it seemed difficult and I didn't want to do it. Before moving on to the doors. So the doors are completely different. You have to toe and heel. And we'll put up a little diagram to explain how you pack bifold doors. So you go from the hinge side up, back down and back up, and here's the other side to show how it all works. And what that does is it braces the doors through the glass, and you need that to pick up the weight of these bifolds. Now, unlike the window, the beads on the doors have the gasket installed already. So we lubricate up the glass, as you can see, with all that water running down it before tapping those beads into position. Remembering top, bottom, and then get the sides in. And then it's time to move on to our handles. So these handles are obviously all supplied in the kit, including the locks and keys. So all it is a case of sliding that bar and the handle on before putting in the two fixing screws and making sure these bifolds all operate as they should do. So now we can move on to finishing the vertical cladding that we started. So we're going to get these in, and remember that very first video we did where we painted the floor. Now it comes in handy again because we're going to be nailing straight into the studs inside with our vertical batons, and we won't miss any of the studs. Just remember, when we cut our batons down, we just batch cut them to that same size that we did all of the rest. And then we just nail through using those marks on the floor and the level to make sure they're completely plumb. That is all of our vertical batons on. We are now starting our counter batons. So we've done the back, and we're now going to get these ones installed at 400 centres. When I mark out for my counter batons, the way I like to do it is to mark off my 400 centres and then just pull a chalk line across and ping it. That way it's a lot less marking out and it saves a lot of time. So because we had already done the back, we just run our chalk from that all the way up to our marks, and we can start nailing off our counter batons using those same 63mm ring shank nails. So as you can see, we've got some pieces here, but that doesn't matter, it's only baton. And once they're on, we can move on to chopping off the overhangs that I leave with a handsaw. It's a lot quicker to do it this way. Some of you might be asking, what is counter batoning? So this is our first vertical baton, and then we put a horizontal across it. Reason being, we're doing vertical cladding. Feed this in here. If we didn't counter baton, we'd lose the airflow that we need to get behind our cladding. If you was going to have horizontal cladding like this, then you don't need to worry about doing the counter batons because you've still got that airflow. We carried on with our counter batons, making sure they're always completely level. And remember, when there's any openings like doors or windows, you need to have one across the top completely level and straight. It doesn't matter about the 400s, it must have one across that door. We have installed the cladding on the back because you wouldn't be able to see it on video, but don't worry, we're going to show you the install on this big sidewall, and we're going to be using Thermo Ayous, or Ayous, I'm not sure how it's pronounced, but this is it, and we're going to be installing it vertically. So all of the cladding on this building was supplied by Southgate Timber. They've also actually given us a little discount code for you guys to use, so check out the link, it will be in the description. So a couple things I learned about this: it originates as an African hardwood, and then once it's thermally treated, that's what makes it Thermo Ayous. So it's a lot more stable, and I can tell you now, it's really nice to work with. It cuts so easily. The way we're fixing this is to nail through the tongue so they're actually secretly fixed. So if you come over, I've nailed through here, and then when I put on my next ball, it'll get stuck. There we go. It covers up all of your fixings, so you don't have to look at any fixings once this is finished. Another thing that I'm doing, every sort of few balls, 3, maybe 4, I'm just grabbing my level and just checking that I'm still plumb. Sometimes they do wander out a little bit, but you can just tweak the gaps and get it back into plumb and carry on. Another thing to note, if you are fitting any real wood cladding, when you're pinning this, those pins need to be stainless steel. If you're using standard pins, you'll end up with the rust leaking and leaching into the wood, and it leaves nasty stains. So make sure you're always using stainless steel fixings.
So while Phil gets the rest of them timbers on over there, I just want to show you guys that there's a 20mm gap from the concrete base up to the timber, and that's to prevent any moisture trapping back up when it rains and rotting your timber.
Well, that's one way to describe the gap and what its purpose is. So I'll get on with nailing or pinning the rest of this cladding on, always working from my left to my right. The reason I do that is because I'm right-handed. You can go either way. And then with the last piece on the corner, I just use my table saw to cut it down. And then we get that face fixed. So we pin through the face because the corners will hide these pins. Before we move round onto cladding the front of the building, we're going to get one of our pre-formed corners on. So that's a corner. And we're actually face fixing these. And all that means is we're just nailing through the front because you can't secret fix this. So we'll line it up with the top. And then we're just going to nail through the face, like so. So we put 4 fixings in. I'm only going to do it on one side. That way it allows a bit of movement between the two sides. Not that this stuff moves very much anyway. Look how cool my glasses are. Before anyone else says it, I know I look like Terminator from Thermo. So I carry on in my cool glasses going around all of the openings. When it comes to your windows and your doors, we cut around nice and flush with our batons that we installed. And then what we'll do, we'll rip one of the pieces down, not this is just some rubbish. And then we'll fix that on the inside, so where your little reveal is. And then we'll use our corners and we'll mitre those round, which you'll see in a minute. And that's how we create the framing for around your windows. So you know, those corners, they're nothing that we've made, they're all available from Southgate. So when we purchased our cladding, we actually got the corners at the same time. So they're made out of the same material. So with that explained, we move on to cutting down the rips that we need for our reveal. So I set my table saw to the correct width before running through our pieces. And this stuff cuts so easily and so cleanly. It's very nice to work with. To attach it, we use the same stainless steel pins, and then we can move on to marking up our legs. They're going to go down the two sides of our openings. We've just started on our reveals, and I just want to show you a couple little things. So when you do your reveals, all windowsills will have a fall. So if you just cut it square, you'll end up with this gap. So what we do, we grab ourselves a folding bevel, which is just basically a piece of metal that moves around, and then we set that so we've got our angle. For us it's around 4 or 5 degrees. And then we cut that first, then measure up and cut it to length. So that way you get this nice tight fit for when we silicone it right at the end. So like I said, we are going to silicone any openings at the end. So if you do cut your reveals a little bit off and you've got some minor gaps, maybe 5mm gaps, you can get away with it. It's just a lot easier for whoever's doing the silicone if everything's cut nice and tight.
So that is all the infills complete around the window reveals. Now it's time to trim them up, and we're actually going to be using the same pieces we used on the corners, but Phil's got to do some intricate cuts.
Not only does Phil have to do the intricate cuts, he has to do all of the cuts. In fact, he has to do all of the work, Brad. So I get on with cutting out the head or the top piece of my corners first. That's the way I like to do it. So I put on 2 45-degree mitres before pinning it into position with those same stainless steel pins. so everything's face fixed, to try and make sure your gaps are nice and equal. And then we move on to the sides. So with the sides, I cut the mitre and then I mark everything else in position. You can use a measuring tape, but I just find it a bit more accurate to mark it while it's there. So as you can see, that bevel that we did on the reveals is the same on the corners. You still need to put in that little bevel before cutting it square for the front. And then once that's slid into position, it's more of those face fixings. And then when you do the opposite side, try to match those pinholes. That's why you can see me looking around like a meerkat. It's the same process around our doors. The only difference is these corners are only sold in a particular length and it's a little bit shorter than our openings. So we have to put a little join on. That's no big deal. You can barely see it. And because it's a natural product, it still looks great. That is all the trims done on the main building. We're also going to carry the cladding on across the 2 flitch beams. So I'm going to do that in super fast speed and then we can get on with putting the roof on. We all love a little bit of super fast speed. When doing these small pieces, it's very important to always be checking for plumb. Once that was done, we moved on to some knee braces. Because this roof's so far away from the building, they were needed. What is a build without a change of plans? I love change of plans. So we've just found that some of these soffits we was going to use on the roof are damaged because we stacked them like idiots. So we're going to leave the roof pin for now, but we're going to move on to cladding these posts, which we wasn't originally doing. But now that we've looked at all the cladding, these look a little bit out of place. You know, it happens. So we're going to use the same cladding and we're going to clad these, go and pick up some corners and install them. So we're going to get these cladded and see what it looks like. Guys, just remember, if you're enjoying any of our content, please hit the like button, hit that subscribe button. Make sure you click that bell for notifications of any new content we release. So when it comes to these posts, it was super simple. It was literally 2 and a bit wide. So using what we had left, we ripped it down and pinned it to those posts. And we've also had to order some more corners because obviously originally these were never getting cladded. But this can happen with projects. Once it's actually in front of you, you just feel like something needs to be changed. And that's what we did. It's better to change it and make it look better than to ignore it. That is as far as we can go with the cladding until we get our corners. And unfortunately, that is the end of this episode. But make sure you join us on the next one where we're going to be converting the inside and hopefully we can finally get this roof completely finished.
And just remember to hit the like button and the subscribe. Love you back.